Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show. This week it's not back to the future, but back to Brexit. Given the tumultuous events of the last week, the subject is back yet again at the top of the agenda. In this week's show, we examine whether the Prime Minister can secure support for her Brexit deal from out with the Conservative Party. We talk to the two key third parties in the Commons arithmetic, her erstwhile allies in the Democratic Unionists and the pro-European SNP. And Alex talks to Hollywood star Brian Cox about his intervention in the European debate, and also finds some light-hearted relief from the woes of Brexit by playing the newly launched Brexit board game with its creator Danny Headland. But first, your tweets and messages, where we've received an enormous response to our special remembrance programmes on the loss of the Lancastria, the largest loss of life in British naval history. First, we hear from Gary, who speaks of Ernest and Jacqueline, who we featured last week. Gary says, I've had the pleasure of meeting both Ernest Beasley and Jacqueline Tanner at the memorial service for the Lancastria at the Catherine Creed Church in London. Ernest is quite a remarkable man who deserves recognition for his heroism, as do all the other personnel who were serving their country or were civilians that were on board on that fateful day. Nathan says, two wonderful episodes about the loss of the Lancastria. I especially enjoyed the interviews with the survivors, handled with respect, lest we forget. Roddy says, good documentary. A personal thank you to you and Mark Hurst for your efforts to bring this disaster to the public notice. My father was a survivor of the sinking, and when he received his medal from the Scottish Parliament, it became a prized possession. Bill says, I hadn't been aware that Mr Salmond had been instrumental in getting the Scottish Government to award a Lancastria medal. And then Andrew says, my great-grandfather was one of the men who lost his life on the Lancastria. My grandma talks often about it. She's also the only person I've heard mention it, backing up your point. Stephen says, I've never heard about the Lancastria. A quick search suggests this is something everyone should know about. I assume it was kept quiet at the time to avoid the bad news of so many deaths. And finally, SGB, who I think is a family member of Ernest Beasley, says, here is 101-year-old survivor Ernest Beasley at this year's London Memorial Service. Here's a picture of Ernest at the service. And here's one that Ernest sent us last week from his family, actually, when he was enjoying his dram of whiskey from his quaich. All to your good health, Ernest. Now to Hollywood star Brian Cox. In his latest blockbusting role in the HBO hit Succession, he plays character Logan Roy, a ruthless Dundee-born media mogul. Brian is, of course, himself Dundee-born. Alex caught up with him in Edinburgh to talk show business, politics, and the case for a people's vote on Brexit.
Brian Cox, let's start with Succession, this HBO sensation which has stormed through this year. Another series set up for next year, I understand.
Yeah, we start in January.
And you play Logan Roy, the ruthless
Roy.
patriarch, head of this media family. How difficult was that?
How difficult? How difficult is it to be ruthless and patriarchic? Well, I have children, and I know what it's like to be a father, so that's part of it.
Well, of course, you're twice rector of Dundee University,
I am, yeah.
And many visits back to the city. But recently, to see the new Victoria and Albert opened in the banks of the Tay. Yeah. What's your first impressions of the V&A in Dundee?
Well, I think it's tremendous. I mean, you know, I think that there's, you know, there'll always be the complainers and the moaners and what have you, but I think it's stunning.
The analogy's been drawn with the Guggenheim in Bilbao. Do you think it'll be as influential for the city of Dundee as Guggenheim was in Bilbao?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I think it needs, it's all the ancillary stuff that goes with it, the businesses that it will attract. And, you know, the figures in terms of, you know, who's going to come. And it seems to be it's doing quite well. I think, you know, the people are attending it.
But you think with Dundee, I mean, a very working-class city, a Scots city, an Irish city in many ways as well.
Very Irish, yeah.
But why is it that a city like Dundee, strongly yes in the Scottish referendum for independence, strongly pro-Europe in the European referendum, what's the contrast between, for example, a city in the north of England, which many of which veered towards a no vote in the European referendum?
Yeah, I think there's a zeitgeist at work, and the zeitgeist is it's the same thing that elected Trump in America. I think really what happened was that there's a disaffection with politics. And Dundee is quite a proud city because it is the yes city of Scotland. You know, we're still very proud of
That was the biggest vote for independence in the Scottish referendum in 2014.
And also, it is not incompatible with our European nature, because Scotland generally has been much more Europe conscious than England has. It's just, you know, we're less xenophobic. That's the nature of our being. You know, we're egalitarian in principle. You know, we have been tribal in our time, but we really are egalitarian, and we're very welcoming. You know, we love people coming to our country. We welcome people in. We're canny at the best of times. But also, I think what happened, there was this what happened in the north was, and you see it now, I mean, the Brexit thing is such a mess. It really is a mess. And you see the amount of treachery and self-serving that's gone on with people like Boris Johnson, Gove, and then you have feudalist Rees-Mogg.
Would Logan Roy be able to sort them out?
Logan Roy would kick their arses from here yesterday. I mean, he wouldn't put up with it at all, because they're basically, they're divisive and they're self-serving in the wrong way. They don't serve the community, they serve themselves. And I think that's, ironically, that is what they felt up in north, that they weren't being served. So, of course, people like Farage waved the fans of Brexit and said, well, you know what, it's blame the others, blame them, blame that. That's what does it.
Now, as an international-based actor, I mean, your interventions in domestic politics in the UK have been quite rare, but they've been very telling on big issues.
And I've been criticised for it as well.
Well, in '97, in the Labour campaign, you voiced over the broadcast very successfully.
Yes, I did.
It has to be said.
I was contributed to get them the biggest mandate ever, probably, in a way.
In 2014, you intervened in favour of yes in the Scottish referendum. Not quite as successfully, but nonetheless successful in Dundee. And more recently, you've now intervened in favour of the people's vote for a vote on the deal that comes back, if Theresa May indeed comes back with a deal from Europe. These are obviously subjects that have been a great deal to you. You wanted change in '97, you wanted independence for Scotland, and now the European issue is a huge factor for you.
It is. I mean, I just think it's a backward step. I don't think, you know, I do believe in the particular, but there's the particular, you know, it's always a paradox. It's the particular versus the general, and you have to hold them together. You can't go one extreme or the other extreme. You know, it's why globalization can really fail, because if it's not thought through about what it does. And the nationalist, kind of populist thing can fail for the other reason. And it's the balance. And I think I was brought up that way. You know, I was brought up to look at a balanced view. And just for the record, I do pay my taxes in this country. Some people don't think I do. I do pay taxes. I am still a citizen of the United Kingdom. And so, therefore, I think, and I'm as passionate about the issues as ever.
And so, what are your hopes? Do you think Brexit can be reversed? Do you think it can be mitigated? Do you think the people's vote will carry forward?
I think that we have to have a people's vote. I do think that we should because it's different. 2016 is very different from 2018. In 2018, particularly in terms of United Europe, we didn't have the President of the United States, who is the President now, who is very dangerous and very unstable in his behaviour. So we've got that. So the need is to be part of Europe, to be part of France, part of Germany. I do think the European community really needs reform. I do think it needs, and I think that maybe we went for too many members too soon. But I do think it's the future. I do think it's the real future. We don't want to go back to a little island mentality.
Now, thinking about the impact of a people's vote in Scotland, I mean, some people in the SNP are overwhelmingly pro-European. But some people in the SNP are a bit reluctant on the people's vote on the basis that, listen, if you set a precedent for a second referendum, then the British establishment will, sometime in the future, will play the same card against Scotland.
Well, it's a nitty-gritty one, that one. But as I said, the climate is so entirely different between 2016 and 2018. And I only think a people's vote is about reviewing the situation. And in terms of what's happening in Europe, there are deals that are being done where there's a situation that we need to think about in terms of our present time, what we're doing. So therefore, it's worth going back and saying, this is the deal, what do you think? As far as the Scottish referendum is concerned, I feel that that's a different, it's got a slightly different element in the sense that that is a clear vote one way or the other. I don't know how you could do a people's vote on Scottish referendum, because it's it has an entirely different quality to it. You could do it, and maybe it's perfectly legitimate to do it.
I suppose there's the argument that it would have been difficult to paint the white paper that I produced back in 2013 on the side of a bus.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be hard.
Since it was about 70,000 words.
Exactly, and that's difficult. But at the same time, it is, you know, I'm all for the people's vote. If there's enough disaffection, then things have to be looked at clearly, and clearly there's huge disaffection.
You think the groundswell's there?
Yeah, I do, especially for the people's vote. I do, because of the nature of the. I mean, it all boils down to, it really does come down to, and it would be the same for the Scottish referendum, is the disaffection with our political leaders. And it really is, it's the same in America, it's the same here, that these guys, and that's why, that's why Hillary Clinton lost the election as much as Donald Trump won it. Obama did not do what he should have done as a president. He had opportunities which were lost. And that kind of created a disaffection in America. And we had the same here. You know, the north of England was ignored systematically time and time again. I mean, there are communities like Manchester who are become sort of much more self-reliant, you know. But it's been very tough for them. And naturally, people have sort of exploited that and exploited their disaffection.
And would the contrast, for example, with somewhere like Dundee, is that many people see hope through change in Dundee?
That's right. Well, you know, in Dundee, because Dundee was, in my day, it was a Labour city, but it has become an independent city because it's the only logical way out of the problem. You know, there has been problems that have built up over the years. And there's still many problems in Dundee. I mean, the heroin situation in Dundee is horrendous, you know, but that's like, we're into third, fourth generations, but that is also a microcosm of what politically went wrong in the past, you know, and now people are sort of standing up and saying, that's got to stop, and the first thing you stop is you actually say, let's clean the act up, let's go that way, let's go towards that end, and that's why we became the Yes City of Scotland.
And finally, Brian Cox, will Logan Roy win through in the next series?
Well, he better, because I need the job afterwards.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Brexit is back, dominating the news headlines and Prime Minister's questions, as we saw yesterday.
Instead of giving confidence to the millions of people who voted both Leave and Remain, this half-baked deal fails to give any hope that can bring the country together again. Isn't it the case that Parliament will rightly reject this deal, this bad deal? And if the government can't negotiate an alternative, then they should make way for those who can and will.
The right honourable gentleman is playing party politics. He's opposing a deal he hasn't read. He's promising a deal he can't negotiate. He's telling Leave voters one thing and Remain voters another. Whatever the right honourable gentleman might do, I will act in the national interest.
However, the real question for the Prime Minister is, can she secure support across the Commons chamber for a Brexit deal which her own party is deeply unhappy with? We talk today to the two parties which hold the key to the Commons arithmetic. First, Alex speaks to Dunfermline and West Fife MP, Douglas Chapman of the SNP.
Douglas Chapman, the Prime Minister seems to be pinning her hopes and appealing out with the Conservative Party to the other parties across the floor of the House of Commons. Is she going to get any support for her Brexit compromise from the ranks of the SNP?
Well, I think she can huff and puff and try as much as she wants, but there'll be no support from the SNP on this deal.
So a lot of people are asking, if the Prime Minister's deal gets shot down, which is the current expectation in a vote in the Commons, then what then? Is this recent decision, the decision this week, to refuse the government leave to appeal against the Scottish court's decision to send this question of the revocation or revocability of Article 50 of the European Court of Justice, and that ruling, which comes on the 27th of November, Could that be a significant feature of the Commons arithmetic?
It's hugely significant, and well done to Joanna Cherry, who's championed this move through the courts as well.
That's your colleague in the SNP front benches.
Absolutely, and Joanna's been doing a first-class job on that. But it really, again, it's really bad news for the UK government overall.
If the European Court of Justice on the 27th of November or shortly thereafter says that, look, Article 50 can be unilaterally revoked, it could potentially open up the space for either a general election or indeed a people's vote. But haven't the SNP rather sold the pass in terms of independence by backing the people's vote? Because many people, including in the ranks of the SNP, are saying, well, that'll be used as a precedent to have 2 votes in any future independence referendum.
Our second referendum will be based on the white paper as it was in 2014. A similar process, I would imagine, would be going through this time around. So there's a firm basis on which that referendum would take place.
So you're saying there's a difference between a government white paper and the side of a double-decker bus. But there's been another interesting development this week. It's not often that the SNP are celebrating the remarks of a Spanish foreign minister, but that's what happened this week.
Well, I believe that Mr Sanchez, who runs the government in Spain, has said this week that his foreign minister has said that should there be a second independence referendum in Scotland, then there'd be no Spanish veto invoked in these circumstances. But if you look back to 2014, the Spanish government at that time, they were plastered all over the newspaper saying that they would halt any progress in terms of Scottish independence.
So you would say there's been a distinct change of emphasis, at least in the Iberian Peninsula, towards Scottish independence?
Well, there has been a change of government in Spain, and we're seeing a different tone, I think, coming from the government in Madrid, which is very welcome.
So Brexit seems to be changing minds all over the place. Douglas Chapman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we saw, the Prime Minister should not be holding her breath, waiting for support from the Scottish Nationalists. But how about from her erstwhile allies in the Democratic Unionist Party? Alex speaks to the MP for Strangford, Jim Shannon.
Jim Shannon, the Democratic Unionist Party have been in a confidence and supply agreement with the Prime Minister, but you're deeply unhappy about our European proposals. What's your big objection to what Theresa May is asking you to support?
Which is basically, Alex, done us over. We're entrapped in a legally binding agreement where the EU has more power over Northern Ireland, and we as MPs elected by the people have at Westminster.
The Prime Minister says, but there are advantages for Northern Ireland. You'll have a special relationship with the UK and a special relationship with the European Union. This could be boom time for Northern Ireland.
I think it's boom time whenever we leave the EU. I'm quite sure about that. But at the same time, I think the Prime Minister has misjudged the view. She certainly has misjudged our opinion within the DUP. Nigel Dodds, our leader, and Geoffrey Donaldson, our Chief Whip, have consistently mentioned to the Prime Minister and to the team that they meet every week, including their Chief Whip, and has told them that there's a red line. There's a red line, and the red line is a backstop agreement down the Irish Sea. They knew that, and yet no, they pursued this here, knowing that we were against it. You can not underestimate just how annoyed, angst, and angry that we are against something we've been done over on.
Now, the Prime Minister seems confident that she can appeal above the heads of the political parties and gain support for her proposals from the ranks of perhaps the Labour Party, the SNP, the Democratic Unionist Party. What would you estimate her chances of actually regaining DUP support?
The withdrawal agreement will, I think, whenever that vote is taken in the House, will be a defining moment for where we stand in the confidence and supply motion. Why is she pursuing something that's not going to go anywhere? That's the question I'm asking. Why pursue something that the majority of parliamentarians don't wish to see happening?
Do you think that the Prime Minister understands that many of the things that the DUP have supported over recent months are not things that naturally, well, particularly somebody like yourself, would find amenable policies? I'm
not sure if the Conservative Party, from the Prime Minister and then higher echelons of the party, really thought that we would this week would not vote with government. I think they thought we were bluffing. Well, I'll tell you what, we're not bluffing. They were surprised. They were caught off guard on the Monday night. On the Tuesday night, they knew we weren't going to vote. We abstained. And to be fair, Alex, on the confidence and supply motion, there was nothing really hard and fast in those 2 days of amendments or votes that were really going to hurt the finance bill. But last night, they didn't even oppose some of the Scots Nats proposals put forward, some of the Labour amendments put forward. I tell you what, last night, if they had known in advance, was a night to put some amendment forward, which they would have been in real trouble to try and win.
Well, you're an experienced parliamentarian, Jim. Can you remember an occasion on a budget amendments that the government has just folded? I mean, what an opportunity for an opposition MP.
Last night was their Christmas come early, so it was absolutely. I mean, it was improbable, almost impossible. I mean, I was told that there was going to be. I mean, my colleague arrived back and he says, "I'm just back in time to abstain." You know. but yeah, it had a desired effect.
Jim Shannon, what? I mean, again, looking at that parliamentary experience, how would you estimate the chances, thinking about the complexion of the House of Commons, of the Prime Minister's present proposals somehow gaining a majority over the next few weeks?
I think it's impossible. The mathematics of this are clear to me. She can't win it. And therefore, why pursue something? And when she goes back from Brussels on Sunday with an agreement, she's coming back with no agreement because Parliament has to endorse this. And as long as the majority of parliamentarians of all sections, of all parties in the chamber are opposed to it, and we, as our partners in the confidence and supply, are opposed to the withdrawal agreement, then she hasn't a hope in the world of getting it through.
And so in the serious world of politics and Brexit, there is very little succour for the Prime Minister. However, if a successful Brexit cannot be achieved in reality, how about a board game? Could everyone spend this Christmas rerunning the referendum until they get the result they really, really wanted? Alex speaks to the Brexit board game inventor, Danielle Headland.
Now, how many times have we discussed Brexit on this show? Quite a few. And every time we discuss it, my Remoaner guests say we should have another referendum. And the Brexiteer guests say, well, it'd be the same result even if we did. Now they have the chance to find out. Thanks to my next guest, Danny Headland. Danny, you've created a Brexit board game where we can all finally get a result of the referendum. How do I play this?
Okay, so the game is simple. You're going to divide into two sides. You're either going to go for Remain or for Leave, and you're going to battle it out.
I'm strictly impartial.
Of course you are. Yes, we all are. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to try to garner votes across the nation. We'll start here in Scotland because that seems like the right thing to do. But of course, to get votes, what you need to do is manipulate the media. So throughout the game, people will draw political headlines, whether or not that's political pundits or some propaganda or some major movement.
Manipulating the media can be quite tricky.
Indeed, but we've narrowed it down to just rolling these dice.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, so each side of the dice has an essential argument for the referendum. It's working class, national security, banking and finance. There's even just some good old spin if you can't get any of the other arguments.
That's more detailed than the arguments that were used in the referendum.
It's very true. Also, unlike the actual referendum, there's facts in this game.
Oh, right, good.
And you can draw them. I tried to make the buses immune to facts, but kind of broke the gameplay.
So who are the protagonists in the game? I mean, who's pulling the strings, the puppet master over there? Who's that there?
Well, of course, we have Merkel over here. And at the very top,
Let's have a look at Angela.
Oh, of course. This is Puppet Master Merkel. You see her pulling the EU away from the UK puppets.
But she's on the Remain side, presumably.
Presumably, it's kind of difficult to figure out which side she was on, but I've counted her over on the Brexiteers, in fact.
Oh, right. And so the other Brexiteers will probably be Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. Do they get a look in?
Oh, of course they do. Yeah, they are some of the meanest cards in the game.
How about others on the Ramon side? Presumably David Cameron.
So we have Gamblin Cameron here, who is drawn pushing an entire stack of chips in the shape of Big Ben towards the camera and flipping his cards flippantly.
Yes, he staked everything and lost. And the Prime Minister, where's the Prime Minister in all of this?
Oh, well, Theresa May has a very interesting card. You'll see that it's drawn as an empty chair. When you draw her into the newsfeed, you would assume she would help really either side, but she does literally nothing. She just takes up space.
Well, that'll keep your game topical. Well, this sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, politicians could learn a lot from this, and normal people could play it as well. I'm looking for Christmas presents for my nieces, so Other board games are available for Christmas as well, but my nieces will probably get the Brexit game. Hope that didn't spoil the surprise. And Danny, for appearing on the Alex Salmond show, can I present you with a quaich? Scots Gaelic for a loving cup. You know the drill. Whiskey in the quaich, and then round all your fellow players.
Thank you, Alex.
It might take more than 20 minutes to drink. Last week, the Prime Minister appeared to be in checkmate on our European deal. With her cabinet in open revolt and little sign of tangible support out with the ultra-loyal in the House of Commons, by all laws of chess and politics, she should have been toppling over her king and packing her bags from Downing Street. This week, she's still in the game. And some commentators are even suggesting there might be a way to get her proposals through if enough opposition votes can be cowed into the lobbies, frightened of the consequences of a no-deal Brexit. The Theresa May plan is to threaten the pro-Europeans with no deal, while simultaneously threatening the arch-Brexiteers with no Brexit. That is how she intends to adjust the pieces on the parliamentary chessboard. But can this gambit possibly work? As we have heard in today's programme, the Commons arithmetic is still daunting. It seems there will be no succour for the government from the pro-European SNP or the anti-European DUP. The Prime Minister has alienated both just when she desperately needs support. There are signs that the pro-European Tories will come into line, but a Tory Brexiteer rebellion of some scale seems certain. And there is no sign of anything other than a token of Labour rebel support. On that basis, the deal will surely still go down. And if it does, the Commons faces stalemate, with no majority for the Prime Minister, no majority for an election, no majority for a referendum, and a huge majority against allowing a hard Brexit. And all this time, the clock is ticking towards the high noon of a no-deal Brexit. So is there a way out of this impasse, this chess pin? Well, the answer might still come from the European Court of Justice. In a little reported Supreme Court ruling this week, the government failed yet again to stop the Scottish case on the revocability of Article 50 going to the Luxembourg Court next Tuesday. If a favourable ruling follows that instrument of withdrawal can be unilaterally revoked, then the Commons would have the ability to stop the clock on Brexit, allowing time for a new range of options, an election, a referendum, a new Tory hard-right Brexit leader. Without the deadline, all things become possible. In chess and parliamentary terms, it would be a form of adjournment. Now, it would be strange if the Prime Minister's best-laid schemes went agley by a combination of Scotland and Europe. Even die-hard Brexiteers might appreciate that particular irony. And so from Taz and me and all at the show, it's goodbye for now.